Yeah, so about the war. I mean, all I can say now is Hoidul Hashem Kitov, Kili Olam Chasdai. We should be very thankful to the Rebbeinu Shalom for the chasadim gluyim that we're experiencing, and Avadu Mispal Adheino Azarunu Rachamecha V'lo Yazavunu Chasadecha V'al Titzishenu Hashem Elokeinu Lo and that Shema Yisrael, Shmor Sheres Yisrael, Val Yovad Yisrael, Lo Shema Yisrael. Anyway, we're going to learn in the parsha as usual. V'hoya lachem letzitzis, ureisem oisoi, uzechartem es kol mitzvos Hashem va'asisem oisam. V'lo yisasuru acharei levavachem va'acharei einechem asher atem zoinim achareim. So v'lo yisasuru means you shall not explore after your heart and eyes. Rashi says, "Loisasuru k'moy vayoshuvu mitur haaretz," which is from the beginning of the parsha. The Meraglim came back mitur haaretz, which actually in English they also say touring the land. So vayoshuvu mitur haaretz. So it's interesting that Rashi brings the pasuk vayoshuvu mitur haaretz, which is like the fifth time maybe that the word appears in the parsha. In the first pasuk, it already says Shelach lecha anoshim v'yasuru es eretz Canaan, and then it says Vayishlach oisa Moshe losur es haaretz. Why did Rashi bring that the pasuk of Vayoshuvu mitur haaretz? Maybe because in that context it has a negative connotation. Vayoshuvu mitur haaretz is after they did it the wrong way, but and this v'lo sasuru obviously has a negative meaning, but sasuru means exploring. V'lo sasuru acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem asher atem zoinim achreim, after which you stray. So what is this talking about? V'lo sasuru acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem. So in the Yerushalmi and Brachos Perek Aleph it says Tanya mipnei ma koirin sholosh parshiyos elu b'chol yom. The question is, why do we have the three parshas of Kriya Shema? And when we get to, so Reb Levi says, "Mipnei she'aseres hadibros klulois bahem." The aseres hadibros are included in the three parshas of Kriya Shema, and he says, "B'tayich advarim loy sin off is v'loy sasuru acharei levavachem va'acharei einechem." So we understand from this that levavchem va'einechem, your heart and your eyes, are both talking about hirhur znus. The Sifri on the pasuk says, "Achrei levavachem va'achrei einechem magid sheha'einayim hoilchim achar halev." Oy einoi elo halev hoilch achrei einayim. Amrit v'lo yesh sumah she'oise kol te'eves sheba'olam. So the eyes are dispensable, but the heart is what it really depends on, and therefore we say that the einayim follow the leiv. But in the Zifri, we also see that the Einayim and the Leiv, the Loisa Suru Achrei Levavchem v'Achrei Einechem, are both talking about the same thing, right? Which is like it says in the Yerushalmi, they're both talking about Hiruz Nus. However, if you look at the Gemara in the end of the first parak in Brachos by Yosin the Bavli, it says we bring a braysa Achrei Levavchem zu minus heresy. V'cheinu omar novel beliboy ein elokim. Acharei einechem ze hirhur aveira. Shenemar vayomer Shimshon el Aviv kach oisa kach li. He wants that Pelishti girl. Ki he yoshra be'enai. She's fitting in my eyes, so you see that einechem is hirhur aveira. And so it's also in the Sifri, in a different price in the Sifri, it's also mavur that Einechem is Hirur Avera and Levavchem is Hirur Minus or Avodah Zarah. So according to this, Levavchem and Einechem are totally different problems. The Sasuru Achrei Levavchem is Minus, the Achrei Einechem is Nus. So we should. It's interesting that the Torah puts them in one package. But it's not just that the Torah mentions it in one pasuk. If you look in the Rambam in the Sefer Mitzvahs, Mitzvah Loisas Salamid Zayin, the Rambam says, "His hironu sheloi losur achar levavenu ad shenamin deyois heper chadeyois shechivosnu Torah." Yeah, we're prohibited from entertaining any thoughts that could lead one to accept ideas contrary to those of the Torah. Avol nekatzer machshevoiseinu. Rather, we must control our thoughts. V'nosim lohem gvul. In other words, we should establish limits. V'nosim lohem gvul namoid etzloi. In other words, we should have a line that we don't pass. Nosim lehem gvul namoid etzloi. V'hu, what's that gvul? Mitzvahs haTorah v'azharoi seho. V'hu amoroi. And this is what the Torah says. V'loi sasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. V'loshen sifri achrei levavchem zu minus v'achrei einechem ze znus. So he's now quoting the Sifri that says that levavchem is minus and einechem is nus. So in spite of the fact that levavchem is minus and einechem is nus, it's under the umbrella of one lav. It's one prohibition in the Minyan HaMitzvahs. It's hard to understand. How does this become one lav? I mean, not thinking minus and not thinking znus. How is that one lav? In the Chinuch it also says like this. In Shin Pei Zayin, he says, Sheloi nosur achar machsheves halev v're'iyas ha'inayim shenema v'lo yisasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem asher atem zoynem achareihem inyan lav zeh sheloi niyached machshevoiseinu. We shouldn't dedicate our thoughts lachshev b'deyos shem hepech hadas she'atorah b'nuya that run contrary to the opinions of the Torah. Lefi she'ef shelova mitoich kach laminas. If you think about it, it might lead you to heresy. Elo im yale aliboy ruach. You'll be in the mood. Lachshoiv ba'oison hadeyois haroim yikatzer machshavtoi b'hem v'yishana lachshev b'darkei haTorah mitzim v'atovim. Ukemoi kein shelo yirdoi fa'adam achar mare einov. A person shouldn't go after the mare einov, what his eyes see. Ubechlal zeh shelo yirdoi achar tavois ha'olam hazeh ki achrisom ro'o uchdei bizoyin v'ketzev. So again, the Chinuch follows the Rambam that it's one lav, in spite of the fact that one is about znus and one is about minus. So it's also in the smag. And the Minchas Chinuch already brings in the name of a Sefer Mishnas Chachamim, who says that he doesn't understand why this is one lav. It should be two independent lavim. And the truth is that the smak, the Sefer Mitzvahs Cotton from Rabbi Yitzchak Mikorbil, one of the Balei HaTosfos, who is also a Sefer HaMitzvahs, so he counts them as two. In other words, in Mitzvah Yud Beis, he has Sheloi Losur Achar Halev, the Ksiv Lo Yisasuru Achri Levavchem, V'dorshu Rabbi Seinu Achri Levavchem Zu Minus, Sheloi Lishoel Malamaylo, Malamata, Malafonim, Malaocher, V'chein El Machshav Shein Torah Ben HaShemayim, etc., etc. And later in Mitzvah Lamed, he says, Sheloi Losur Achar Ha'ayin, the Chsiv Achrei Einechem. Dorshu Rabbi Seinu says Znus, Sheloi Yistakel Benoshim L'Shem Znus, and etc. So he has them as two independent lavim. So also, it seems from the Rabbeinu Yoin in Shai Tshuva, in Shai Gimel, Ois Kotten Mem Aleph, he says, V'loi Sosuru Achar Levavchem V'achrei Einechem, Uzharnu Bazeh Sheloi Lachshev Avera, Val Kol Dvar Pesha V'chato, Sheloi Laharer B'divrei Haminim, Pen Yikoshel V'yimoshech Achreim. Later, in Ois Kotten Samach Daled, he says, V'gam Rabim Noikoshim V'nilkodim, B'chalalom Hachushim Hanichbodim. People are Amachalel, their chushim, their senses, chush hara'ois, v'chush hashema, v'nemer al chush hara'ois, V'lo yisasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem, whose hand was shelo yistakel odem beishasish u'b'shar harayis pen yukash behem. So he's putting the einayim and the lave in two different categories. So also in the Azhoris Harashbag, which is Reb Shloime Ibn Gibirol, he has a Choik Lo Yisasuru, which is Kuf Chof Hey, and that's Choik Lo Yisasuru. It's one mitzvah. So says the Rashbatz, which is a commentary on Reb Shloime Ibn Gibirol's Azhoros, a commentary by the Tashbatz, Zoyar Harakia, it's called. He says, the Korav Limnoisam Shtayim, Shein Yonam Chaluk, Zeh Minus, V'Zeznus, Vas Kosov Chilkon Ba'amore Achri Levavchem Achri Einechem, V'lo Yom Achri Levavchem Ve'einechem. Anyway, so we see that there's a major shaila over here, why the Rambam and those that follow him count this as one. So, it's like this. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Avodah Zorah, Perik Beis Halacha Beis, Svarim harbe chibru oivdei avodah zorah ba'avodosa. Right? Oivdei avodah zorah, they wrote many svarim about how to worship the idols. Right? Heich ikir avodosa uma maaseo mishpateo. Sivanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheloi likrois bo'isam asvarim klal v'loi nahar bo b'davar midvareo. So we're prohibited from reading those books or from thinking about anything that it says there. Also, to look at an idol, it's also why shenema al tifnu el ha'elilim. So even just to look at it, ube'inyan hazeh nema ufen sidrosh le'elohayim leimor eicha yavdu. You're going to want to know how do they do their thing. Shaloi tishal al derech avodosa heichi afal pishein atoivdo. Even though you have no intention of worshiping the avodah zarah. Because it will ultimately cause you to turn to the false god. That's going to be a consequence. It's a possible consequence. Now the Rambam says, so if somebody turns to the false god in a derech shu oisa b'maisa, he gets malchus. V'loy avodas kechavim bilvad, hu she'osel hi ponis achareh b'machshava. Not only avodas zara, ela kol machshava shegeremes le'la'odam la'akor ikir mi'ikorei ha'torah. Any thought that can cause a person to uproot one of the fundamentals of Torah, we're prohibited from thinking about it. We shouldn't move our thoughts in that direction. And the Rambam explains, people have limited powers of understanding. Not all minds are capable of appreciating the truth in its fullness. If everybody will follow his own thoughts, yeah, he's going to destroy the world with his limited understanding. Keitzat, yeah, pa'amim yosur achar avodas kechavim. Pa'amim yachshev biyichud aboirei shemahu, shema einoi, malamayla, malamata, malafonim, malaocher, pa'am b'nevuah, shema yema, shema eino. Upa'amim b'toira, shema him in the shemayim, maybe not. Val inyan zeh, his hira ha-toira, v'nemar bo, v'lo yisasuru achri levavchem, v'achri einechem asher atem zoynim. Kloima, lo yimoshech kol echad mikem achar daitoi haktzora. Yeah, we shouldn't follow your limited mind, v'yadame, shemachshavtoi maseges ha'emes, and you'll think that your machshava comprehends the full truth. Kach amru chachamim, achrei levavchem zu minus, v'achrei einechem zu znus. V'lav zeh, afal pishu gorim l'odem l'torah dem in ha'olam, ein boi malchus. So, what do we see? That when it comes to Avodah Zarah, there's a special azhara, thinking about the Avodah Zarah, and lehiponois achareha b'machshava, and we learned that from Al Tifnu El Ha'elilim. and it's repeated in the pasuk of Pen Tidroi Shle Elohim, and the Shnei Lavim B'inyan Echad. But these Lavim, the Rambam says about them that there's a possibility of it being over b'maisa, and then you take get Malchus. So, and Pashtus, it says in the Gemara in Erev and Daf Yud Zayin that the lav of Al Tifnu El Ha'elilim, there's Malchus for. But there's another lav, a separate lav, as the Rambam says, to think machshavas of heresy, of minus, which is any machshava that can cause a person to uproot one of the fundamentals of Torah. And in this lav, machshavas nus is also included, as the Rambam quotes the pasuk, "V'lo yisasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem," minus and nus. And this lav, there's no malchus on. The Rambam says, "Mafurish, this lav, there's no malchus on." So the Kesef Mishnah says, "She'ein loikin olav zeh klal shebiyodenu lav she'ein by ma'aseh ein loikin olav." But you know, first of all, so now comes out like this. Besides, we need to understand what's the pshat that the achrei levavchem that asa is machsheves minus and the achrei einechem that asa is machsheves nus are one lav. We also need to understand what's the difference between the lav of al tifnu el ha'elilim, about which we say that it's possible to be over this lav with a maisa, and on the other hand, the lav of loisa suru, we say it's impossible to be over with a maisa. In the machshavas avodah zarah, you were also over on the loisa suru, because it's a maisa laker ikemikra atorah. But the maisa is considered a maisa only legabe the lav of al tifnu, and not legabe the loisa suru. So listen, if you have patience, I want to explain this. I think very well. According to the Girsas Hasvarim Shalonu and Erevin, Daf Yud Zayin, Rav Acha bar Yaakov says that you get a malchus on the lav of al tifnu el ha'elilim. He's actually talking about the lav of loisifnu el ha'oivos. But in our Gemara it says el ha'oivos, which is kishuv. So, but Taisus asks, what do you mean? How do you get malchus on the lav? It's the ein by maisa. So Taisus says two tirutzim. The yashloime the osilaman the amar lav she'ein by maisa loikin olav. Inami akima svos of havi maisa. So in this context, we're talking about that I'm asking the magician for help. So it's akima svos of havi maisa. Or we're following the man the amar that lav she'ein by maisa loikin olav. But the Rambam is goris in the Gemara that Rabbi Elazar ben Yankov is saying, is talking about the lav of al tifnu el ha'elilim, as he clearly quotes this Gemara in the Sefer HaMitzvahs Loi Sasa Yud. And we paskin that lav she'ein by maisa ein loikin olav, And even if we will say like Tosfos that said legabe the magician that it's possible to be over the lav of al tifnu el ha'oivos with a dibur and akim asvos of havi maisa, and we'll say that it's somehow possible to be over the lav of al tifnu el ha'elilim with a dibur, it won't help us, because the Rambam holds that akimas vasayim lo havi maisa. The Rambam, as the Rav Amagid says in Hilchos Schiras, Perek Yud Gimel Halacha Beis, the Rambam says that akimas vasayim havi maisa only when it's b'diburo is avid maisa, when a maisa is accomplished through his dibur. But otherwise, we don't say that that akimus vasayim havi maisa. Talking is not a maisa. So the question is, how does the Rambam say that there's malchus on the lav of al tifnu el ha'elilim if you did it with a maisa? What did you do? He wasn't over the avodah zarah. We're talking mefurish that he wasn't over the avodah zarah. He's just taking an interest in the avodah zarah. He's learning about how you worship this avodah zarah. How did he do that with a maisa? So the Marshal in the Bir Asmag in Loi Sasa Yud Daled, he says that it's possible to be over this lav with a maisa, that if the avodah zarah was covered and he uncovered it. As I zog the Marshal, believe it or not. It's hard to understand why the uncovering is considered a maisa in the avera of looking at it and thinking about it. I mean, how is this maisa considered a maisa that registers in the lav of looking at it or thinking about it or learning about it. Yeah, I mean, this Maisa L'chara is an independent Maisa. The in the Seif Alikutim in the Rambam in the Frankel Rambam, they bring the Pri Chodesh, and this is his lashon. Lav behistaklus kamar. It's we're not talking about looking at the avodah zarah. The bahiloi mishkachas lamaisa. Ukidamrinu beperik arba mises. Shani edim zaymim hoil v'yeshnam b'riyah. Riyah is not a maisa. Elo iker pirush al tifnu, says the Pri Chodesh, hainu be'iyun v'chakira b'inyanei avodah zarah. That he's learning about the avodah zarah. Ubazeh im asa maisa v'avodah shel avodah zarah. Doesn't explain what in the world does that mean. He's learning about the avodah zarah, but he did a maisa. What did he do? It's iyun. He says iyun v'chakira b'inyanei avodah zarah ubazeh im asa maisa v'avodah shel avodah zarah. So in other words, probably it means that he wants to know exactly what needs to be done. He's not being mechaven to worship the avodah zarah, but he, in his process of learning, he actually practices to see exactly what's done, and he did it with a maisa. Anyway, but he has another taich you could see, but achrei kol advarim ha'ela, we still need to understand why in such a case should it not be considered a maisa also in the avera of the lav of loisa suru achrei lavavchem v'achrei einechem? Why is it only a maisa when it comes to the lav of al tifnu? Yeah, which is all, they're both about thinking. The lav of al tifnu is thinking about the avodah zarah, and the lav of loisa suru is thinking about minus. Why is it only possible to do a maisa in the lav of al tifnu elo elilim, and it's not possible to do a maisa in the lav of loisa suru? So I want to say like this: the lav of al tifnu elo elilim is shalolihi ponois achareho ulehis asegbo, not to turn to it and to engage your thoughts in it. But the lav of loisa suru, the Rambam says shaloi nosur achal avavenu. It seems from this that the Isser is not because of the whatever that I'm engaging my thoughts in, that I'm turning my thoughts towards. It's really about leaving where I'm supposed to be at. Right? So it's not about what I'm thinking about. It's about what I'm not doing. I'm not being mekatzer my machshavos. I'm not koiveya a gvul. I'm not limiting my thoughts. And the shorish of this hagdara, why do we define it like this? Because the Torah put into one package, achrei levavchem va'achrei einechem. In spite of the fact that when we're talking about minus, we're talking about an intellectual mistake. And when we're talking about znus, we're talking about an emotional attachment, engagement. And so how is this one lav? Al korchach that the yesod of the isur is in the sasuru acharei per se, meaning that the levavchem and the einechem are two ways in not having your own reshus hayochid, in your mind being open, yeah, in your thoughts being uncontrolled, in aimlessly thinking, right? It's the sasuru acharei, which is the isser. It's not what you're thinking about. It's that you're not here. And memela, it's not shaykh a maisa. Whatever you're going to do, that's not a maisa in the sasuru acharei. In the altifnu el ha'oivois, or the altifnu el ha'elilim, it's shaykh to have a maisa that strengthens that turning towards. It's in the turning towards, because that's what the isser is in the altifnu el ha'elilim. Whereas in the loisa suru, the isser is to take off the limits from of your mind, and memela it's not mishkachas lo b'maisa. But anyway, this explains how the sasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem, in spite of that one is about minus and one is about znus, they're the same lav. You know, the Gemara in Brachas Daf Yud Beis says, Parshas Tzitzis mipnei makva uho. Why did they put the Parshas Tzitzis in Kriya Shema? Amar Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva mipnei sheyesh ba chamisha dvar. Mitzvahs Tzitzis, Yetzias Mitzrayim, oil mitzvahs, v'das minim, hiru avera, v'hiru avodah zarah. So you know, if you have enough fingers, you can count that we mentioned 6 things. We said mitzvahs tzitzis, yetzias mitzrayim, oil mitzvahs, das minim, hiru avera, v'hiru avodah zarah. But Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva says it has chamisha dvar, and he goes on and he says 6 things. So on the side of the Gemara, it says Misvar Macherim Garsin Shisha Dvar, that they attack those that are Garis Shisha Dvar, not Chamisha Dvar. But in the Taisus Harash, he says it's Chamisha Dvar, and he says that we should say that Avodah Zarah and Minus Chode Choshev Lahu. That Avodah Zarah and Minus is one. But the Maharsha and the Chidush HaGodah says V'tzorech Loime the Hira Avera V'Hira Avodah Zarah Choshev Kechod. Hira Avera and Hira Avodah Zarah is Choshev Kechod. So the way we saw from the Rambam, we can say that even though it's taka 2 different things, but it's one in the parsha of Tzitzis because they're both under the umbrella of Eloi Sasuru Acharei, and they're both about not being where you ought to be, your mind not being where it ought to be within the limits of the Ikrei HaTorah Va'azhoroi Seho. So I'm saying that in the Pniyah to the Avodah Zarah, it's Shayach HaMaisa, and what Megafa from Menashik, one of the Achronim say, Lilmoid Mitayich HaMaisa, the Indian of Avodah Zarah. But when it comes to the Lois Asuru, the Maisa doesn't register in the Avera, because the Avera is not blocking my thoughts, right? Not being within the Gvul Namoy Detzloi, right? And how did we get to this? Because Lamaisa, the Pasuk says, that the next pasuk says, "Laman tizkiru v'asisem es kol mitzvosai." So that's why the Rambam said that the gvul that we're talking about is mitzvos haTorah v'azhara yiseha, because the next pasuk says, "Laman." What do you accomplish by this? Laman tizkiru v'asisem es kol mitzvosai. It's interesting. I mean, we're worried about forgetfulness. L'chara, I mean, if I'm going to think all those thoughts that I shouldn't be thinking, I might be zodoin, transgress the prohibitions of the Torah. But the way the pasuk says it, it's like kind of an understatement. It says, "So v'loy sasuru l'man tizkeru v'asisem," as if the chashash, the what we're worried about is that I will forget. But the pshat is like this. So it's okay. Listen, the nekuda is obviously that if your mind is not concentrated, it's not focused, it's not engaged in mitzvahs haTorah v'azhara yiseha, and it's let free, it's not just that we're worried that you'll get involved in something negative, but you'll forget your mission, you'll forget where you are, you'll forget what you stand for. And therefore, the pasuk talks about Laman tizkiru v'asisem es kol mitzvosai. And the truth is that both in minus and in znus, it's about seeing things, seeing phenomena externally in the here and now, and not looking at the full meaning that things stand for. And that also explains why it's in one lav. You know, there's a maaseh that they say a yid came to the Maggid of Mezrich, and he asked him for an eitzah to get rid of machshavos and irhurim roin. So he sent him to the tzaddik Reb Zev Wolf Mizhetomer, and he said that from him you'll learn how to overcome your machshavos and irhurim. So at that time, this Reb Zev Wolf wasn't known yet, but nevertheless, this Yid, he traveled to Zhetomer, and he, with the hope that Reb Zev Wolf Mizhetomer will teach him. When he came to Zhytomyr, there was it was night already, and he barely was able to find out where this Rebbe lives. When he finally got to the house, that the people showed him, he knocked on the door once, twice, three times, but nobody answered, and he was at the door till the morning. In the morning, when Reb Zev Wolf came out of his house to go to shul, so the Yid followed him. After davening, he tried to get into a conversation with Reb Zev Wolf, but he wasn't successful. A whole day he looked at what Reb Zev Wolf was doing, but he didn't see anything particular that he should be able to learn from him in order to find his way in Avodas Hashem. When the night came and he sees Reb Zev Wolf is locking the gates, and since the gate was a bit elevated, so he saw that he takes a piece of wood and he puts it on the ground, and he makes sure that it's totally closed, and then he put something on it that shouldn't move. Anyway, this happened day after day, and this Yid is draying sich over there in Zhytomyr, and he doesn't know what in the world is he supposed to learn over here. So finally, he approached the Rebbe and he said, "Listen, the Maggid of Mezrich sent me because I asked him to teach me a derech and avodas Hashem, how to get rid of machshavas v'irhurim roim." So Reb Zev Wolf said to him, "No, as soon as you came to my house, I showed you that when I lock the door, that nobody should come in, only if I let them in. If I don't open the door, nobody's coming in. Then you saw that locking the gate is not enough, that you lock it on top in order that people that you don't want shouldn't come. You have to also make sure that it's all the way to the bottom, that even the small rats shouldn't be able to get in. And so a Yid has to firzach with a minig balabayis, with his own head, to allow entry only to those that he wants to allow, and not to allow entry to those that he doesn't want. And Memela, that's the Achrei Levavchem Zuminus, that's closing the upper gate probably, and the Achrei Nechem is the lower gate. But in any case, the point is Sheyosim Lohem Gvul. A person has to have the ability, not to think aimlessly, but to have focused attention and to know. Like they say, that somebody was so open-minded that his brains fell out. That's really the point. That sheyosim lahem gvul, and the gvul is in every sense a person has to live a life which is v'yisim kedoshim l'lekeichem, consecrated, dedicated, focused, and not a free-for-all mind. Okay, Rabbi Say, chizku v'yamitz levavchem.